Experience different with Aniswa Works.
A Snitch in the Dark. Aside the striking resemblance, my mom and I do have a lot of other things in common. One of our favorite things in the world is cooking for friends and family. The only thing that comes close to the warm feeling we derive from making food is the joy of frequenting a gem of a food joint. One of such places I remember fondly is a little pork joint right at the end of the Oxford Street. When I was around 10 years old, it became a habit for my mom and me to take a walk some nights of the week. We would walk, and I would talk about the things that happened during my day at school. Just before we stepped out one night, my mom told me about a place she wanted to show me. I got pretty excited, and my imagination ran wild. Was it the playground at On the Run she was taking me to? Or was it a new toy store? Ice cream, maybe? I could not stop smiling, and that evening, I set the world record for quickest time exiting a house. We walked out of the barracks, down the street, and to the gem she had found. It was right opposite the photo club in Osu. I knew immediately it was something I could eat, but I could not tell exactly what it was, as there were a lot of persons swarming around the cellar. I was a tiny kid, and even on my tiptoes, I couldn't see anything. I asked my mom what it was. She told me it was pork. I grinned. Pork? How epic! I couldn't wait. Little by little, people were served and they left. Now, it was our turn. My mom got 2 separate ones, one for her and one for me. I knew my mom would never give me permission to eat while we walked home, so I didn't even bother asking. Finally, at home, I unwrapped mine with eager hands and stuffed a piece into my mouth. In that moment, it all made sense. No wonder there was a swarm of people over here. The pork was unbelievable. It was tender, crisp on the outside, yet juicy inside. And the mixture she sprinkled over the meat, I dare say, was formulated by Zeus himself. My eyes may have filled with tears, and I may have sung a song. I cannot tell you for sure because that pork seized my attention. The next day, at school, it was all I could think about. I could not wait for school to be over, so I could go home and revisit my new bestie. Eventually, I got what I desired. That day, I did not spend all the money I had on me for school. Instead, I kept some and handed it over to my mom so she could buy me even more pork. So thus, our little tradition was born. Every other day, we would take a walk, bond, and eat the tastiest pork on the planet. Now here's where it gets messy. I cannot tell you where the idea came from, nor why I decided to do it, but I began to sin. When my mom and I would go buy our pork, I was always the potter and would hold it. I knew my mom's pork was the bigger one, and mine was the other. As we talked, I would lag behind and gingerly open the wrapped up goodness that belonged to my mom. I would then pick one, shove it into my mouth, and eat it as quickly as I could manage. Unfortunately, I wouldn't stop at just one. I would actually eat 4 or 5. My scam continued for weeks. My mom would always complain about the difference in the meat when we got home. She swore it was less than what she watched the lady dice for her. She weighed the possibility of the lady having some charm that made the meat appear more than it was. I never said a word, of course, just blended into the background like a chameleon, and my wonderful mother never suspected her tiny angel was to blame. One night, my mother and I were out on our usual pork run. We had grabbed the pork and were on our way back home. This stretch, of course, is during when I would make my move and charge income tax off my mom's pork. I had already eaten 2 pieces when I plotted to dig out the third. I had to be careful my mom didn't see me, so I kept looking at her as well as behind me. The coast was clear. I grabbed another one, shoved it in my mouth, and as I ate it, I scanned the area. To my shock, there was a man sitting to my left on the sidewalk, and it was apparent he'd been watching me for a long time. Immediately, my pointer went over my mouth as I signaled a warning for him to be quiet. I was unaware at this point that he was a descendant of Judas Iscariot, but he made that very clear and quickly. The man shook his head at me, letting me know he would rat me out. Before I could do anything, he spoke. "Madam," he called out to my mom, who turned around to look at him. "Your daughter is chewing the thing," he said. My jaw dropped and my heart sank as my mom whirled round to have a look. Suddenly, it all made sense to her. "Hey, Kadi," she said in shock. "Sana out here?" she asked. I expected her to be mad, but it seemed my actions were so surprising to her that she could not manage a temper. She was astonished by the fact that I was able to think up such a plan and execute it flawlessly for so long. All the way home, she talked and laughed about the issue. I knew what was coming, and it was worse than a scold. When we arrived, the first thing she did was to tell the story to my uncles, granny, and aunts. The teasing was endless, and their shock immeasurable. I sat there with the biggest pout as they made songs about me and the pork. To be honest, the jokes and jabs dissolved my taste for mischief entirely for a day or so. My mother didn't cancel our evening walks to the center of town. Neither did she hold the experience over my head for long. We kept going to the pork lady for many years, but we all know who wasn't holding the pork though.